There was information provided. Some of the questions that I'm going to ask may be information the government has provided. There's been a bit of a challenge, though, with the reliability of the information that the government's provided. So I'm looking to get a confirmation with the data points that I'm seeking from you. So, and if you don't have any of the information that I'm asking, perhaps you could provide it to the committee in writing following your appearance. Would that be okay?
So any information related to a customer, we would need the consent of the customer to provide that information. But if there's specific information that the committee needs, I'm happy to go back to work with CBSA in order to provide that to you.
Okay. So are you able to tell us how much is the number that the government stated the correct number?
So, yes. So what we noted from both what was reported by journalists and what was provided to Parliament was consistent with our understanding of what was billed, yes.
Okay. And what was that number?
I believe it was approximately $4.29 million.
$4.29 million. Thank you. How do you determine who's working on what? So which resources are being used on particular projects and how much to bill the client? Like how do you track that?
So in the case of how we provide those services, those are the rates in terms of those services are pre-negotiated with the Government of Canada through the Cloud Framework Agreement. So it's a standard-based price. And in terms of the skills that we're looking for, so all of our solution architects or members of the team that provided those services are experts at our cloud services, particularly experts on security services. And so the team in this case was handpicked based on the security requirements of the project. Okay,
so how do you quantify the billing units for cloud services? Would that be done by minute or by gigabyte, or how would you do that?
It's complicated. So the billing of actual sort of cloud compute is done based on services as well as units of compute. So it's difficult to predict in terms of usage, but basically customers are only charged for what they actually use. So it's a consumption-based billing service. And again, the rates in this case are prearranged through the framework agreement. So it's a standard-based price again. And then in terms of the expert advisory services, those are a weekly unit.
Okay. How much business do you do with the Government of Canada when it comes to cloud services?
I don't actually have that figure. That would be a number that we would actually have to work with the customer to provide to the committee.
Okay. Would you be willing to commit to the committee to work with your customer to provide that number to us?
It would be the broader Government of Canada. So if by line department, I guess. So I'm not sure how we would do that, but I'm happy to sort of work with others to figure that out.
Okay, I appreciate that. So you also offer professional services, is that correct? As a different service to your cloud services, is that correct?
The terminology in the Cloud Framework Agreement is advisory services.
Is that ProServe? Is that what that is?
That would be our internal marketing language, but that's.
So that's what would appear in a contract, for example. It would be described as such.
I believe the framework agreement would describe it as advisory services.
Okay, so you offer advisory services. Can you give me a very brief, 15-second example of what one of those advisory services might be?
So, I mean, I can try to kind of give you a better characterization of how that work happens. So, our ProServe team, which is our internal kind of language, never has sort of hands on the keyboard. So we don't actually do the kind of IT management services that perhaps might be more common by other types of consultants. So the advisory services are really around specific architecting of AWS services within the AWS cloud environment. And so that is sort of built in a development environment, and then the implementation or operationalization of that is done directly by the customer.
Okay. So I have the same question about the amount of advisory or ProServe businesses that AWS does for the Government of Canada as a whole. You've given an indication of what that answer might look like, though. So I have a few more questions, and I'd like to circle back to them in my next round. I've got about 55 seconds left. There's a figure, you said $4.29 million. Would cloud services, advisory services or ProServe, would contact centers, would all of the work done through those different lines of business, would they equal a number equal to or greater to the $4.29 million? On
ArriveCAN?
On ArriveCAN.
I believe that, I don't know about contact center. I don't believe that it would include any contact center services related to, I'm not even sure we did contact center.
So it's I've got 10 seconds left. So it's possible that if there was contact center, it would not be included in the 4.29 million.
Correct.
Okay.
A different statement of work.
Can.
I'm not sure that we did provide contact center services for ArriveCAN.
Okay.
What would the type of work that would be completed at the contact centers that I've referenced on a project like this, if it were to have been used, which you were unsure if it had been?
Yeah. So I'm not sure that we worked with this particular customer on a contact center. So. So we do provide contact center solutions. We essentially provide the building blocks to stand up a virtual contact center for customers. And so we did, for example, work on other government projects that were related to contact centers, but I don't know specifically if we did one related to ArriveCAN.
Okay. And the type of information that would be available when you're billing your client would include all of the details that would line up with the contract. So how your base costs, your the time worked on the app. Would you include like billable hours? Is that something that would be included?
I believe that the services are actually billed by week rather than by hour. And the way that our advisory services work is it's outcome based as opposed to design some specific coding for a specific thing. So it would be broader parameters in terms of requirements that the customer would have. And then we would work to design or architect based on an outcome that was required as opposed to a specific kind of part of the project, if that makes sense. So the benefit of that to the customer is that a lot of our customers don't maybe have the full expertise in understanding how to leverage those services effectively or efficiently, which security, for example, which security services may be of most value to them in their context to meet their governance standards. So we would be able to, I think, have a little bit more creative license in driving that solution based on the experts that we have within our company to produce those outcomes for the customer.
So we've discussed a kind of a suite of services that AWS is able to provide. In previous discussions or papers that have been released from the government, it's been noted that there were other options for the government to pursue in terms of subcontractors or vendors on this project. Is design something that's in the wheelhouse of Amazon? Is that does AWS have a design department? Is that a service that you offer?
What kind of design are you referring to?
App design.
No, we don't. We don't do that.
Okay. So the totality of the services that you were able to provide, you did provide on this project.
I'm not sure what you're asking. I'm sorry.
So your company competed in a bidding process for the work that you received. Is that correct?
So we competed to be part of the framework agreement. So as part of the framework agreement, line departments can procure up to a certain threshold in terms of service, but there's a ceiling to that threshold. And then once you exceed or expect to exceed that threshold, there's a sort of secondary phase of procurement that would become more competitive to ensure that the government was using the sort of most transparent means to procure those services.